All right, Nathan Muris. Nathan is a friend of mine. We've been in a mastermind together for the last a little over a year now, I believe. I
Yeah.
will share more details about him, but rather than me telling you, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself in your own words, Nathan.
Hey, Aaron, how you doing today? First of all, thank you for having me on. Super excited to be here. Hopefully, I can share some value and insights into kind of what we do and our story. But yeah, essentially, I'm a, I guess, husband, father. I try to be a good husband. I try to be a good father. I'm also a full-time technology professional, technology executive. And when I'm not, being a good husband, being a good father or working my day job in technology, I also spend quite a bit of time in real estate investing, particularly remote real estate investing out in the Midwest. I'm based on the West Coast and spend also a significant amount of time helping others do the same, achieve the same, get started, start investing in real estate, diversify from maybe their other investment vehicles that they have. And yeah, I guess that's the long and the short version of this, essentially.
Doesn't sound like you have too much going on. So, believe it or not, Nathan and I both have the same 24 hours a day that the rest of humanity does. So, I think one of the first directions I want to take this is with all those dimensions. You got your career, which it sounds like you've accelerated to an executive position. You've built
Mhm.
a career that, in and of itself, probably took a lot of time and upskilling and networking and just
Yeah.
general energy to build. You've got your family, you have a wife, you have kids, and you have this whole real estate portfolio you built on the side. And then further, you and I are now I am a fellow podcast host too. And we know that it takes a lot of time and energy to run a podcast and coach others. And so knowing that we have the same 24 hours within a day, I'd love to just hear, how do you find ways to fit all of those things in to your daily life without going crazy?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And I think there's a lot of dimensions to the answer to that question. And to be clear, when we dive into these different dimensions, I don't think any of those happened all at once. It's stacking small changes and small wins over time, over the years to get to a point where we can and I can indeed be successful or achieve working on all these different things. But the simplest way to say it is at the end of the day, it's just being organized. I think so. It's being organized and being intentional. So I'm very intentional of where I spend my time. I'm very intentional of how I spend my time. And I'm pretty ruthless when it comes to not spending time on anything that doesn't necessarily help me advance these different dimensions, be it the online catalog of tools for real estate investors that we build, be it a podcast host, be it father, husband, W-2, whatnot. And one of the tools that I use every single day, which is going to sound horribly boring to everyone out there, but I just use my calendar. And essentially in my calendar, it's pretty much every hour, 24 hours a day, but every hour of every day has a block on it for something specific. So it's sleep from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And then 5 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. is me time. I just work on reading, focus, meditation, workout, all these different things. Then it's an hour chunk for kiddo time. And then it's a big 8 hour block for W-2. Then it's kiddo time for a block in the afternoon, dedicated to kind of family time. And then it's an hour time for podcasting, an hour time for every REI tool, like this online catalog that I mentioned. And then it's an hour block for me and my wife time. And then it's rinse and repeat, essentially. So pretty much every single slot that I have available in my day is, accounted for and is used intentionally for one of these dimensions of my life. And then I think around that, there's a lot of supporting tools and tips, tricks, whatever, things like that just help me be more productive. But I think at the core, it really all is about being intentional and organizing and protecting my time. So there's not a whole lot of time that I'm sitting on a couch doing some Netflixing or doom scrolling on social media or anything like that. And yeah, that's really the gist of it, honestly. And I don't
That's
think
an
people should try to make it more complicated than that anyway.
Totally agree. I use a very similar system, and kind of the way I've explained it is I block the most important things and I protect them at all costs. So for me, that's my family time. So I have my non-negotiable. Every evening, I'm going to have dinner with my family. Every night, I'm going to put my daughter to bed. Every morning, I'm going to get my daughter up. I'm going to take her to daycare. And those are the immovable objects, right?
Yep.
Short of a medical emergency, or obviously when we're on
Sure.
vacation or something like that. Um, but if I can keep those pieces fixed in place, then I know that I've protected that time. Obviously, I want to spend more time than just that with my family, but
Yeah.
I think working backwards and then building those blocks where you have put time aside to work on the things that you want to advance. So I love that strategy. I heard you mention like even meditation and exercise. So those are on top of the original dimensions you mentioned at the beginning. And
Yeah.
so have you felt that even despite all these things in motion, that you've been able to maintain that kind of health, physical and mental health component, or has that ever slid along your journey? Because I think it's so important to continue to
No,
budget
so
time for those, but it's easy for it to slip.
so actually, I want to say it's the opposite. It's increased to a place where I'm healthier, feel better, sleep more, and then just overall feel more healthy and in a good mindset than I've arguably ever been. And I think it's also because I have protected time to focus on that, and therefore obviously make it a priority and a focus of mine. So yeah, if anything, it's the exact opposite. It's like a lot of spinning plates, sure, but they each have their spot in my day essentially. And that just helps keep me sane and organized and happy and healthy and worry free and not anxious or no feelings of being overwhelmed. So if anything, it's the opposite. But I think it's to your point. What's worked well for me is putting the most important blocks in there first and then working backwards. And for me, it started with a big chunk of sleeping time, just because, yeah, if we're not rested, if you don't feel good, if you're sleep deprived and whatnot, everything else is going to start to fail. And then it's put it in those family blocks, which I want for those to be a priority, be it just me and my wife time or kiddo time, family time, put those in next. And then there's obviously W-2 responsibilities that are a big chunk of time that are demanding, especially in the role that I play, but it's starting with those. And then you find time for the rest, right? It's not that complicated. Um,
Totally agree. So with that said, I know we've talked already about some lifestyle and how we manage time, but we have yet to dive into some of the accomplishments. I'd like to talk about two different realms here. One is your career and how you ended up in the current career path you're on,
mhm.
and the skills that you've used in your career that you've applied to your real estate. And the second would be just understanding what your real estate portfolio looks like these days, how you got started, and what your goals are. So let's maybe start with, what do you do for a living and how did you get into that?
Yeah, so I've always been in software engineering. So my background, my education, both undergraduate and graduate education has always been computer science. So by trade, I'm a software developer, a software engineer. Exiting my graduate degree, I found myself teamed up with a group of individuals where we launched a small company, small at the time, that built software for the construction industry, essentially. And we were very fortunate to have one of the few successful exits. We sold our business to a big corporation out here on the West Coast, and I joined that group through the acquisition. And then from there, I just helped build software products and software teams. So over time, people management, and then you grow your career and you end up leading relatively large groups as an engineering and technology executive. And so that's essentially what I still do today. And how that's helped me in general is that, first of all, I love technology. That's a passion of mine. I'm genuinely curious and interested in technology, and I always have been, which is why I got into that field in the first place. But I guess it just allows me to be aware of tools and systems that are out there that could just help me automate as much as I possibly can in my life and maybe streamline as much as I possibly can in my life so that I don't feel overwhelmed, so that I could achieve more and do more. And that's not necessarily because I am a software engineer, meaning I don't know that you have to be a developer to leverage these things and get to that point, but it's just my proximity to, I think, the technology space, given that is what I do on a day-to-day basis. I just know about a lot of tools and I like to research them, use them, and then implement them in my life to be more productive, essentially, at the end of the day.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree that you don't have to be a software engineer to use some of the amazing tools that are available, readily available, most of which are free these days for real estate investors. But having that strong background allows you to navigate those. And I know you've even built some of your, like you built your own website where
Yeah.
being able to whip that up and have a list. We'll let you promote that in a minute, but you have a couple of different workflows you built to support your business and help other real estate investors with education, tools, technology. And so I'm sure just being able to think with that engineer mindset helps you. Not to mention, I imagine the paycheck is probably better than some other careers, and that helps
Of
fund
course.
the
Yeah.
real estate, which never hurts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I
with
think
that, go
it's
ahead.
really, I mean, it's what I try to do, and this is maybe the engineering mindset, is like any task that I've done more than once, I will stop myself and see and figure out and try to understand how can I automate this so I never have to do it again. And it's just, and maybe that is that kind of engineering background and mindset, but that's where it stems from. And then I essentially try to either automate everything or forget everything, meaning I want to get as much out of my brain as I possibly can so that I can only focus on the important stuff. And a small example of that is like I use an iOS device, an iPhone, but I'm sure this is equivalent on Android devices. The shortcut menus for any app can allow you to send something to a reminder, and then you set a date and time for that reminder. That way, when something pops up, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't need to worry about this now, but I'll have to answer this email next week. So just set a reminder for next week. I forget about it, it pops up. And when I need to take action on it, I can, and I do. And then you can do this in emails, email clients, Slack, everywhere on your phone. And it's just things like that, essentially.
There's something to be said for not carrying all that mental overhead around of, oh my God, I know I have 15 tasks to do sometime over the next 7 days. So I'm going to let all of them live in my head until they're done. It's no, you have to get them out of your head,
Oh,
find a
100%.
way to capture them and put them in a system that you can trust and either, yeah, set up reminders or automations so that you know that even though you took them out of your head, you have some sort of safeguard that they're going to get done. And I like to even add, so obviously anything repeatable, if you can automate it, that's great. I also
Hmm.
started working with VAs, and my kind of
Hmm.
framework is if it's repeatable and it doesn't require decision making, then it's definitely something my VA can do. So between the automations that are available and the VAs that I've worked with, I now have way less mental overhead when it comes to just all the moving pieces. So that's great. And so your real estate portfolio, let's break it down. Give us the Reader's Digest. When did you start? What did you focus on? How did it develop and where is it going?
Yeah. So I guess we started in 2016, 2017, something like that. And it all started with when my wife and I wanted to buy our primary residence in the Bay Area, California. And we were looking at our initial and our first primary residence acquisition and purchase, always through the lens of we're going to live here for a while, but at one point, kids, schools, we don't like it. Whatever the reasons, we were going to move on and probably move to some other place. And when we do, we wanted to make sure we could rent out the place that we were buying as our primary residence. So we looked at and we're shopping around for our primary residence, looking at it through both lenses. This is our home, but also this is going to turn into a rental. So that's really when we got started. We then, and I'm trying to remember exactly like the different dates and things. It's a few years ago now, but I think fairly typical, I think, or at least I've heard this story many times before. So we're not really special or different that way. But I heard someone on some real estate show, podcast, YouTube channel, in a book, I can't remember, it might have been Brandon Turner or something, explaining this concept of buying a rental property for your kids, having the tenants pay down your mortgage over 15 years. And by the time the kid reaches college age, you have a fully paid off asset that either generates money that could be used for paying for college, or you can refi and pay for college, sell the asset, pay for college, but essentially have somebody else pay for your kid's education without you needing to save those hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years to pay for your kid's education. And I heard that as we were having our firstborn, I was like, yeah, this is genius. This is a great idea. How come I've never thought about that? But who cares at that point? So I was like, okay, let's figure out how to do that, because I'd much rather have somebody else basically pay for a $200-300 asset over 15 years rather than me needing to find $300,000 worth of savings and then second kid times two, right, over 15 years. And I say that was the catalyst for launching us more seriously into real estate investing. And then it was basically looking at what was realistic and available around our location and where we lived, seeing that it would be very hard to get something to cash flow in the Bay Area of California. And again, I said very hard. I know it's not impossible. Some people are going to get upset when you say that. It's just harder than other places. So I started looking elsewhere. And the what we were looking for, because newborn, full-time jobs, already senior management at the time. My wife also has a full-time job. So we're already busy. I was not looking for something that would be taken more time away from me. So I wanted something to be as easy, as simple, as passive as possible. And that kind of, over time, research, reading, education, talking to people and whatnot led us to considering extremely simple to understand, or say easy to understand, single family homes out in the Midwest, because they're, yes, one, more affordable price points, but maybe more importantly, because typically Midwest housing markets are much more linear and boring, right? They're relatively predictable. They're relatively flat. They're not cyclical like the coasts and whatnot. So just an easier thing to start with, like a single family home in a relatively simple, linear, quote unquote, flat market with one tenant, one mortgage, one insurance, all of this stuff that just led us to single family homes. And when looking for these first, in this case, it was the first rental property that we wanted to buy for our son. As I mentioned, we were looking for this to be as passive as possible. Plus, obviously, we're not located in the Midwest. We're still on the West Coast. So we're going to have to find our team, property management, insurance broker, mortgage broker, handy person and whatnot to help with any and all of the work and management of the property. So we wouldn't have to do that. And so we spent the time building that team, then acquired this first property. And it was so easy. And I'm saying this in hindsight, right? It was a lot of time and a lot of research and a lot of hours and a lot of networking and mastermind and talking and whatnot to get to a point where, okay, let's do this. But once we acquired that first property, in hindsight, we were like, hey, this was actually extremely simple. And then, so I think it was maybe 3 weeks after we closed on our first investment property, we already had the second under contract, because an opportunity came up and we understood what we're dealing with. It was a very similar home in a very similar neighborhood, like 3 or 4 blocks down the street or whatever, same team and whatnot. So it was just very easy for us to just go on and acquire the next one. And so we got those. And then we got to thinking, ideally, each of these properties is now generating an amount of free cash flow. So cash that we can essentially do whatever we want with. And we were not spending that on going out dinners, beers, vacations, or anything like that. It's cash that we're just saving. It's staying. And again, looking at our numbers and running our numbers, hey, if we get to a certain number of properties that generate a similar amount of free cash flow, then that threshold number for us was 8 in our case. But once we get to 8 properties, then those 8 properties will start generating enough cash on their own to fund the next acquisition, the down payment for the next property. And then we don't have to come out of our own pockets for acquiring the next property. So after that second purchase, we ran those numbers that I was just describing. You're like, hey, if we just keep going a few more, we'll get to a place where it'll be a self-sufficient system. And isolated system just pays for itself, saves enough down payment funds in a year, 6 months, 4 months, 3 months to fund the next acquisition. And that's basically how we got started and where we are today.
It reminds me of that, was it Pringles ad? Once you pop, the fun don't stop. You got that first one, and then all of a sudden the light bulb
Never
went
thought of
off.
it that
Like,
way, but yeah.
hey, we can replicate this same. You put all that effort, start at the beginning to building a team, picking a market, like you said, it's a lot of due diligence, phone calls, vetting different team members. Ultimately, you're putting a lot of your own money in an asset that somebody else is going to manage from
Mm.
a couple thousand miles away. It's a lot of trust you have to build. So the upfront work, I try and be very honest with the audience. Most of my audience is people who are either, just getting started or maybe have one primary property and looking to
Yeah.
expand into others. And so I try to be very honest about the fact that it's a lot of work to build the foundation. But once you have a buy box, a
Yeah.
set of parameters that you know will work for your financial situation and will meet the goals you're trying to get, whether that's cash flow or appreciation, or in your case, the college fund idea. Once you have that defined and you have your team in place, it's actually not as hard to keep it going. So I think that's a really important thing to punctuate because you probably, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
if you're not in an active buying phase, I imagine you don't have to spend too much time on your portfolio, just with the management and all that between the automations and your property manager and all that. Is that a big time sink for you, or is
No.
that pretty streamlined?
Not at all. I think to your point is if we are in an acquisition, it's a completely different story because just like anyone who's bought a home, any kind of home will know and understand between loan documents, insurance, inspections, offers, negotiations. Yes, there's obviously more when you're in the process of buying a property. If you're not in the process of buying a property, it's I'm trying to think even over the last month or two, I think it was 4 emails maybe over the last month or something like that. Outside of that, I spend 20 minutes a day seeking and looking for the next property that we want to acquire. So looking for additional opportunity, but that's not management. That's growth. It's looking for the acquisition of the next one. Like for our existing portfolio, to your point, yeah, it was, I want to say a couple emails in the last month, maybe 3, 4 emails. I don't know, something like that. So not a lot.
Yeah, it's a mindset of defense, right? Playing,
Yeah.
protecting whatever risk might come up for your current portfolio, touching base with your property manager, bookkeeping, all those tasks that just keep the operation moving. And then there's
Yeah.
offense, which is, yeah, looking for your next deal, whether it's in your same market and that you already have a team and a buy box in, or whether it's maybe even expanding out into a new market. Those are the activities you want to be spending time on. Those are what actually
Yeah.
grow your portfolio and get you closer to your goals. So yeah, there's a time and place for both, but the more you can streamline those defense activities, that probably the better off you'll be. And as we were talking about at the beginning, we all have lives. We all have
Yeah.
families, most likely, or at a minimum, probably have a job, other things you want to spend time on other than just scouring real estate listings and dealing with tenant calls and property managers. You've built a pretty incredible business. I know you from the time we've spent together. You're very thorough. You have very methodical process for how you acquire properties, how you find team members. You and I are both very passionate about helping other people get started.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is getting over the mental barrier. There's something just overwhelming if you're starting from scratch when you think about buying a house, especially potentially out of state, and you just have these nightmare scenarios playing through your head where something goes wrong and you're not there to fix it. And sometimes that can be paralyzing. So you obviously you're outside of your primary house. You decided to invest out of state, which took some courage, and I'm sure you grappled with some of those same
Mhm.
emotions. What did you do to get past that initial mental barrier and feel comfortable enough to actually close on your first rental? And then part two of that question is, once you realized it was possible, what
Mhm.
gave you so much confidence to be able to just start repeating that so quickly? You said it was only a matter of weeks before you were looking at your next property.
Yeah, I don't know how popular this answer is going to be or whatever, but the remote or local or the remote versus local real estate investing, to me, that I was gonna say never entered the picture. It was irrelevant, I think is a better way to say it, because even if I bought the house next door that's right behind me as a rental property, right? I don't want to manage it. I don't want to spend time managing it. And I always knew that. I always knew we were going to go into this for the long term potential and for real estate to be the vehicle. but not for me to turn into a property manager, not for me to turn into, and me, it's me and my wife really, but it's not for us to turn into the social support for the tenants if they needed it. So even if I bought this house next door, I would have found the team to manage it for us. And now, whether it's here, the house next door or a house 2,000 miles away, at that point, it doesn't really make a difference. If something blows up in the house next door that I own, I'm not the one that's going to go fix it. So I'm still going to rely on somebody or call somebody or whatever. So in that sense, it was irrelevant, local versus remote. So the remote piece of your question is what's irrelevant or never really entered the picture. Um, and I guess to answer the other part of your question around, what it took, I think it just took the time, and we could talk about time a whole lot, especially about real estate, because I think that's something that trips up a lot of beginners, but it took the time and the diligence to find and build that team, right? Once I knew I could trust my property manager, then essentially it was like, okay, it makes no difference if this house is next door, if the house is 2,000 miles away. But we spent, I mean, I want to say 8 months maybe of research, education, books, networking, talking to other investors, asking for recommendations, calling those recommended property managers, acting as a prospect tenant, acting as a prospect owner, Google reviews, Yelp reviews, Reddit, you name it. But we spent hours and hours of time to find the right team. And once we had the right team, then those fears, in a sense, and they're always fears, right? If you're going to pluck down $40,000 for down payment, closing costs, and things like that, of course you're scared, but it's no different than any other big purchase. But knowing that we did our due diligence and we have a solid team, then those fears went away.
I love that. So it certainly sounds like you spent plenty of time doing your research and you named a few
Mhm.
different ways that forums, interviewing other investors, presumably interviewing several property managers and probably checking
Yeah.
referrals. There's a number of different ways you can do it, right? But until you're actually working with them, how can you know that you trust them?
So for me, it was two things. The most important one is other investors who are currently using those services. In this case, we're talking property management. Because if they're a happy investor getting what they're expected from their rental property and they're not whining and complaining and overwhelmed and anxious about their situation because they have a solid property manager in place or more broadly team in place, then I will trust that has a whole lot of weight in my evaluation. The other thing that I did, which isn't maybe as important just because it's easier to tweak, but is I actually went on Thumbtack, Yelp, Google, and whatnot, and searched for reviews because while it's not everything, they're actually pretty relevant, in my opinion, for property management and I say that because they're stuck between owners wanting a whole lot more from them in terms of news, information, better returns on the rental property, faster turnarounds to get a tenant in, you name it. And on the other side, they're stuck with the tenants who are like, this broke, that broke. When am I going to get this thing fixed? When are you going to deliver or switch utilities over? Whatever it is. They have a pretty crappy job. And if you can find an online review of a property manager that has decent amount of reviews, meaning not just one, but maybe in the hundreds, and that their overall star rating is pretty high, that's usually a good sign because the people reviewing these property managers are the tenants and the owners. So those are the two things that we looked at.
Well,
Yeah, sorry, that's basically, how we spent the time. But I would say again, if you can find other investors that have a similar profile to yours, that invest in similar properties as yours, and have been working with these team members, in this case, we're talking property managers for an extended period of time and are happy with them, that's worth a lot. So that's where the networking and finding other investors to talk to is critically important.
absolutely. I think so. I've been very open about when I did my first fully remote investment in Iowa, we did not do as much due diligence as I would have liked. We did a very thorough interview. We had multiple interviews. but we didn't do a lot of that. Like we didn't have a local investor on the ground that helped us qualify the company we hired. And surprise, it was a terrible experience. They didn't
Yeah.
find a tenant for our property. There was a whole slew of borderline disasters that happened. There was no heat in the house in the middle of January. They priced it too high, got no leads, and we ended up
Mhm.
firing them 7 weeks in. So those are the type of stories that you can avoid if you do that due diligence, use those strategies Nathan
100%.
mentioned. And yeah, I would say the key component is those other investors. Find someone, you don't have to know them in advance necessarily, but it's amazing how easy it is to network online these days. And it's also amazing how generous people are willing to be with sharing their
Yeah.
experience. I know I would gladly, if I had a rock star property manager, I would gladly share that contact with someone who is looking to get into out of state real estate investment. They're feeling a little conscious about how hard it is to build
Mhm.
that trust. Making that connection for someone else would mean a lot to me. And I know that there are plenty of other investors out there that are willing to share those contacts like that. And there's a lot of communities, right? So Nathan and I are part of one mastermind together. I think we're both part of several other masterminds too.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge unlock for our networks. And so once you just put those feelers out, and if you're authentic and you actually care about what value you can bring and how you can help other people, you'd be surprised how willing other people are to help you too. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about coaching. There's two realms here. We're both coaches ourselves, but we've also been coached. So I want to talk about just your evolution. I know you're passionate about helping other investors, but what order did you approach this in? Were you the recipient of coaching before you offered coaching? What is your relationship with coaching and how did it come to be?
Yeah, so I think the easiest answer is I received it first, and it's always been part of my life. I was a professional ski instructor and a professional skier essentially for many years when I was a young adult, an older teenager, whatever. So just by nature of that, you are coached to become an instructor. You are coached to reach a certain level of competition in skiing. And so I've always been part of my life, even early on, and even subsequent to that in my technology career, in the different companies and corporations that I've worked for over the years, there are always development programs, be it online trainings or in the form of coaching platforms, be it individual or group coaching. And that's helped me tremendously in my technology and W2 career as well. So, and if you, maybe even more importantly, is that I'm always looking to grow myself, always looking to get better, reading podcasts, documentaries, whatever it is. So just generally having a coachable mindset is just part of who I am. So I think that's what I started with. And I also got coached on like the real estate investing front and all that when we were getting started. So I think it started with that. And like for many people, I think, but just organically because our friends and family and coworkers and friends of friends and coworkers of coworkers were witnessing and seeing what we were doing in real estate, investing remotely, full-time job, young kids, all this stuff, and we could make it work. They would come to me and my wife and ask, well, how do you do it? How did you do that? And how do you do this? And when you want to do this, how does that happen? So we just started helping because we believe in helping others. And yeah, that's just how we got into more formal coaching. Because again, I was like, I've said this 12 times now. Let me record it and send it to somebody so I don't have to exchange time for the same basically question, essentially. Back to automate. I've done this thing twice. Can I automate it so that it's repeatable? So that's how we got into it.
There's a couple questions that always come to mind. These are just like prompts I've heard about either setting up a product or a service. What
Mhm.
can you talk about unscripted for 30 minutes? What's one topic? So for us, that's probably real estate investing. And I'm sure there's others too. And the second is, what do people constantly ask you about? So I think you just answered that, right? Your friends
Yeah.
and family and other coworkers and people started approaching you about real estate. So why not start to package some of that content? I think you have a newsletter. I know you have a website. And like you said, you created some tools where when somebody asks you a question, you can now point people towards that. I did the same. I started a newsletter last November. And now
Mhm.
just about any common question that I've been asked. If somebody asks it now, I can just point them to one of my previous newsletters. And I like being able to do that. Frankly, I don't mind having the conversations with them, but it's so much easier if I'm like, hey, I wrote about this in detail. Here's some screenshots and step by step on how to use
Yeah.
this software. And then further, if people really do want to be coached, which is different than just following a training manual. If they want to be coached and they want to set goals and really work towards them, work on their mindset and set a vision for the future, that is something that I feel passionate about being available to people for.
Mhm.
It's something that I've worked with coaches on. And I like what you said about just continuing to be coachable,
Mm.
regardless of where you are in your career or life. That mindset is worth millions of dollars or millions of
Mm.
whatever currency you value the most. I think that's an incredible mindset to have.
Yeah.
Family, back to family. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Do you and your wife, what role does she play in your guys' business? Do you guys talk about your vision for your real estate business together? What kind of partnership do you guys have on your business?
Yeah, so I think you said we're partners in life, right? We're partners as parents, we're partners, just she and I were partners in this business as well. I think like, we're partners in the sense that we help support each other with the vision itself and where we're trying to go, and there's different milestones along the way. So we're absolutely partners. We talk about real estate on a regular basis, right? If not every day. Where we stand in our lives today, I have a slightly more active or more hands-on role in the day-to-day, just because my wife also has a full-time job and we have 2 young kids and she works in the service industry. So it often means that she's nights and weekends type thing. And then our schedules don't necessarily overlap. So we often find ourselves single parenting and we've got no family. Closest family is 10,000 miles away. So we're just, it's hard to sit down, both of us together, to do all the things together. And that's the main reason. With that said, though, we have a plan that we discussed that will help her transition away from her service job if she chooses to, when she chooses to. And that will afford us more time to spend, for her to spend more time on the real estate business. That then comes with things like real estate professional status, which then helps with things like our joint income tax and additional deductions and all this gory detail stuff that I don't want to scare people about. But we have a plan. We have a plan and we're partners on that plan and partners on making it reality. I think our current reality is like each of our involvement is not necessarily the same today, and it will change over the lifetime of us going from where we are to our different milestones. Because I don't think there's no finish line. It's we're progressing towards a greater future for ourselves and our kids and grandkids and all that. But there's no, oh, once we hit X, Y, or Z, whatever that may be, then we're done. It's not part of our plan or vision.
Absolutely. And the one key theme I heard there is that you guys are you're very much aligned on what your vision is. I think that's one of the most important things is just being on the same page about what your goals are. And you also don't need two people doing the same thing. If she was
No,
running a
exactly.
podcast and you were running a podcast and she was doing deal analysis and you're doing deal analysis,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not really necessary. And frankly, like you said, you guys oscillate based on sometimes your schedules are offset a bit. And so you got to watch the kids and she's got to watch the kids.
Mhm.
Running a household is a full-time job,
It is
whether or not
indeed.
you work a W-2 or whether you're an entrepreneur or whatever it is. And so just even being on the same page about your roles within that part of your
Yeah.
life, it has tremendous value. And then, yeah, you can start to do the longer time horizon planning. You bought the houses that are essentially college funds for your kids. You want to have the option potentially for her not to work. You've got some
Mhm.
tax strategy and things that you can do. Just having that roadmap and that foresight to be able to look at the big picture and stay aligned the entire time. That's the dream. That's awesome to hear. If there was one thing you had to tell a brand new investor, let's say they're of a similar mold as you and I, they have a full-time job, maybe they already have a young kid or they want to have kids soon, and they're not sure if this is going to fit into their life, what would you tell them? Should
That's
they
a
do
great
it?
question. 100% you should do it. I'd be a hypocrite if I said don't do it because we were able to do it arguably successfully given our circumstances like that we've already talked about. So yeah, yes, they should do it. Absolutely. And we've just been talking about vision and where we want to go and whatnot. And we often have this conversation with my wife. Even if we stop today, no more acquisitions, nothing more, we're done, no more real estate. We just keep what we have compared to all these crazy success stories that you could see and hear about online and whatnot, we would seem minuscule, tiny, but our retirement, our future lives, our kids' lives will be tremendously different and changed for the better, even if we just stop today. So we didn't lose anything. Do we want to go bigger and keep growing all that stuff? Sure, of course. But even if we don't, it's okay. Worst case, we just call it quits, done. Our lives are going to be substantially different for the better and our kids' lives as well because of where we're at and what we've done thus far. So absolutely, I would do it. I think the other piece of advice that I often end up discussing with people that we engage with, coach, interact with is the concept of time in real estate is very different, in my opinion, to the rest of our world. Everybody's used to text message, answer immediately, email comes through immediately, one click buying on Amazon, it's on your doorstep 3 hours later. I'm hungry, I stick it in the microwave, my food's ready in 30 seconds. Real estate could not be further from that. We're talking about 6 months to 8 months of just education. Then it's 45 to 60 days once you have a signed offer. Like, oh, great, I bought a house. No, it's not yours until 60 days later, typically. Then it's new home onboarded by the property management company that you use. And it takes a year, 2, 3 sometimes with tenants coming in, coming out, property management taking over a new home that they don't know, that they haven't fixed up, that they haven't managed, that they haven't inspected all this stuff. So it takes a year, 2, 3 to stabilize a new property before it's humming along with a good tenant, nothing breaking and all of that. So just things take time. Just take time and people need to be ready and okay with that.
I think I saw you call it, what was it, the microwave mentality, right? The fact that we're also conditioned
Yeah.
to just throw it in the microwave for 45 seconds and it's ready to eat. Yeah,
Yeah.
breaking out of that and just zooming out. And to your point too, when you buy a house, sometimes we get fixated on, hey, this is going to kick off $100 a month in cash flow after all the expenses that I can use towards my daily life. But you're also, if you zoom out and put it on a 30-year
Mm.
timeline, you're going to pay down a loan. You're going to be able to
Yeah.
increase those rents over time. If you bought it on fixed rate debt, that cash flow is going to increase. There's a number of different benefits that you're going to get if you can focus on the long term that you wouldn't otherwise
Mm.
get if you invested in just about any other asset class. So that's a good call out too. It's like the cash flow is nice, but it's a very small piece of what the overall benefits of investing in real estate are. So one other
Yeah.
question I have for you before we wrap things up. We didn't really talk about Undor Capital, which is your business. So what is Undor Capital? What are you looking to accomplish with it? And then we can round that out into how can people stay in touch with you and follow you?
Sure. So essentially, yeah, it's Undor Ventures, but or just Undor is the simplest way to remember it. And essentially, that is our real estate company, for lack of a better term. It just sprung out organically from doing the things that we do and talking about real estate, like we discussed on the show today. Excuse me, but it really started from us looking to protect our assets from a legal standpoint. So instead of owning them in our own names, own them in an LLC and whatnot. So we started with that. But then because we started helping and coaching other people, we saw some income through that. So it became like a coaching thing as well, in addition to our real estate company, essentially. And then because we found ourselves talking to a lot of people who are interested in real estate, either through coaching or just learning from our experience, we ended up also coming across folks that were interested in investing in real estate, but didn't weren't interested necessarily in owning the asset. They wanted to diversify. They were trying to understand how they could potentially put their money to work. And we've essentially now engaged in private money lending or leveraging private money lenders to fund our real estate business, which then in turn obviously provides these lenders with typically double-digit returns on their money. So it grew into these three different things essentially. So that's yeah, Undor essentially.
Awesome. So it started with buying a primary residence and it turned into now a full on venture, you got teams
Yeah.
across the country, you got a portfolio, you got seeds planted for your children's future, you've got a long-term vision for your family. It's just amazing how probably when you started, you couldn't see all that coming together just yet, but then once you're in, it's turned into something pretty incredible. And this is the story, these type of stories are what I love to share with the audience because I think
Yeah.
just having that, taking that first step and getting started, even if it's not the home run deal that you might be swinging
Mm.
for, just getting on base and playing the game allows you to open the door and work towards these broader, beautiful
Yeah.
visions that can play out over a long time. So, Nathan, thank you so much for joining today. Where can people find you and how would you like them to stay connected?
Easiest way to get in touch with us and to avoid or to feel more prepared already and avoid some of the mistakes we made when we got started investing in real estate is to go get our checklist essentially. And you can go to readyforrealestatechecklist.com, all spelled out. And you'll get a checklist of things that you need to do to get ready to get started, and as well as our contact information, and we'll be in touch. So that's essentially the easiest way. Readyforrealestatechecklist.com.
Very cool. And I will make sure to include that in the show notes. Nathan, thanks again. And we will have this out shortly to our audience. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate you, Aaron. Thanks a lot.
All right.